So it's been pretty much a year since I first got my hands on the DJI digital FPV system, and over the course of that year there's been a lot of things that I love about it, a lot of things that I hate about it, and just a bunch of other little miscellaneous things I want to talk about. So we're going to go over the air unit, the goggles, their controller, the smart controller, and kind of just review what it's been like over the past year now that I've pretty much adopted this system into my everyday flying. So without further ado, let's get into it. And as we head into this, if you can think about it, please like the video, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. It's so helpful. You have no idea. All right, we're going on. Carry on. First, we're going to address the things that I love about the DJI digital FPV system. I think the biggest case that I can make for this thing is that I've pretty much changed everything over to it. I know that's not really like a review piece or a glowing praise or anything like that, but what is important is that it is something that I've adopted, not only in my freestyle but also in my commercial work, and especially in my commercial work. Being able to have the penetration and the range and the ease of use and the simplicity of the builds all comes together to make for a really compelling argument when using it on set. That being said, I don't use this system for racing. I still rely on analog systems for a number of different reasons that we'll get into later. Compatibility with other analog users, the little bit of latency that's left over, stuff like that. But for the most part, everything but my racing rigs, I try to fly on the DJI FPV system. One of my biggest pieces of praise that I can give to the system, and it's not actually the system, but DJI itself, is the continued aftermarket support that they've got. They've added the ability for you to use the smart controller as a viewing system. Now, some people might say that they're just trying to sell you a new piece, but that might be the case, that might not be the case. But they have added that after the fact. They added the ability to put OSD elements on your screen so you can see what Betaflight would normally have had. They updated it to 50 megabits mode. All of this stuff is stuff that's coming after the fact, and I think that's a really compelling argument that DJI cares about making this product better and last into the future. Another thing that excited me about DJI's interaction with the community is that they went out of their way to support analog mods. So this is my analog mod. Some people have it on the front plate, but I can plug in, like a rapid fire and be able to use this with traditional quads. And they listened to feedback while we were doing it. So we had a problem with the latency that came out of the analog mod. They enabled DVR. They allowed for analog scaling, all sorts of stuff that they didn't have to do. So I think that that's a really good sign that they want to support both parts of the hobby. I've gotten hooked on the DJI's penetration. The ability for this to see through walls, trees, buildings is stuff that I couldn't do with analog before. And to me, that ability to see through things, to go to different places that I would have to have set up 2 different shots for or something like that, speaks volumes to why I use this every day, especially in a commercial filmmaking environment. Not only is the DJI system really good for people that are experienced with FPV, but it's also really good for people that are just getting started. It's a much better experience, I think, than analog because it's very simple to set up out of the box. The picture is clear, and it handles more like you kind of dream FPV would. You don't lose video when you go behind something. You have better penetration. You have to know all of these different milliwatt outputs. Now, there's downside to that. Obviously, not knowing as much about antennaing and transmissions and all this stuff can be a downside. But for people that are just getting started, that are just wanting that warm introduction to FPV, the DJI system is perfect for it. Not only has this system lowered the barrier to entry to FPV itself, but it also makes it easier to build drones. Drones that I build that use the DJI controller, that means I'm not using a Crossfire or some other 2.4 gigahertz receiver. There's only 14 solder joints to build an entire drone. You've got the 12 that you put the motors on to the ESC, and then everything else is like the camera, the VTX, the receiver are all plugged straight into the flight controller with one plug. And then the only thing you have left to solder on is the battery leads. And to me, especially when I'm building a fleet of 6 to 8 quads for a commercial use, it's really, really nice to have that simplicity of build right there ready to go. Not only has DJI come out with their proprietary equipment, but they're supporting aftermarket items like the Caddx Vista or the new RunCam camera that's both analog and digital. It's cool to see them embracing the manufacturers that are already in the industry and partnering to create newer and better products. One of the things that I didn't have the chance to test out when I first got the unit, because not many people had them, was what's it like to fly with other people that are flying digital. And to be honest, it's kind of awesome. Like you just go in here, once you're because you're already bound, everything's bound together. It's not just listening to the same channel. You just click to a different channel and all of your video transmitter, your controller, and your goggles all switch to that next channel seamlessly, and that's pretty awesome. So like I was just down with Rotor Riot in Florida. We had 7 people flying on DJI at the same time, and it was the easiest thing in the world to get everybody up in the air. Another thing that I was excited about was that I've actually had really phenomenal reliability with these. I would probably go through 10 to 15 analog video transmitters in a year, and I think to date I've only killed 2 of these, maybe 3. Both of those were due to water damage. Like I was flying over water, crashed into water, and some water got in there and broke it. But I've also had like 10 crashes into water, and I crash into water a lot. It's bad. Like my philosophy with going over water is put a water bottle on the bottom so you can get the drone back. I've only killed 2 of them due to water damage. Everything else has been fine. So like to me, that's pretty compelling on, you know, comparing these to like, you know, $50 video transmitters that I would buy in the past. That's something we're going to talk about right there. That's really funny that that just happened. Compared to video transmitters that I used in the past, I've had a lot better reliability with these despite, or maybe because of, their higher price. All of the products that I'm using here are linked in the description below. They support this channel through affiliate links. If you're interested in buying any of them, please use those links, and I can continue to make more content like this. And then the final thing, over the course of a year, this hardware still looks really good. We'll kind of take a look at some of these really close, but you know, I've got like some dirt in it and stuff. Like I take these onto set, really, really dirty, nasty sets, but like no buttons are breaking. All of the antennas are still solid. The buttons aren't worn. I don't have any issues inside of the lens. This is the original foam that came with it. You can see it's starting to get a little bit chewed up there from my big nose and stuff like that, but all of the fans are working, all of the functions are working. It's held up really, really well. So I've been really impressed with how this is done as hardware over the year. The same can be said about the controller. I use this fairly often. Probably half my quads are using this controller. It's still in great shape. No buttons are broken off, which I definitely can't be said about my Taranis or even my Futaba. That being said, maybe I'm a little more rough on them. That's been great. And then, like I said, the air units, I've had, you know, maybe, I think I have 20 of these probably now, and I've only had problems with 2. So that's, those are pretty good results for the way that I abuse my gear. I don't know if you could really consider it a feature, but like over the last year, I've had the chance to introduce a lot of people to FPV, Neil deGrasse Tyson among them, and the experience that people have the first time they put it on, they say like, oh my gosh, this is what you see? People get pretty excited about that, and I'm really glad to bring them along for the ride. Not that analog wouldn't be a good introduction, but it's fun to show people in a different way. Not to name drop or anything, but boom! Despite all of the luck that I have had with the DJI digital FPV system, there are some things that did not work very well over the last year. We're going to talk about those next. The biggest and the most annoying thing that I've encountered recently, and it might not be the most important one, is that when you lose video, your DVR stops. We were just filming a video the other day, and we would get out long range, and I lost video for a second, got it back, and my DVR cycled, stopped recording somewhere in there, and I had no idea. So maybe a kind of a niche place for someone who's doing reviews of stuff, but that was really obnoxious. Not only that, but when the video gets low and you start to drop frames because you're receiving less digital information back from the unit, it starts to change the time warp. It speeds up and comes, and it gets really annoying to work with in post. So Winston, I apologize for that trouble. The stock jock strap that comes with the DJI unit, the one that goes over the top and then on the sides, and then there's a little hole that, like, if you put it around yourself would make sense. Sucks. So I got the Rotor Riot single strap, and this thing is so much better. It doesn't fall off. There's buttons instead of stuff. Like, upgrade that. Strap sucks. The stock DJI antennas are garbage. Throw them away, get some True RC or some Axie 2 HDs. They're so much better. Don't use the stock DJI antennas. The ones on the receiver, these are okay, they're fine. The ones that are on the goggles, no. By default, the stock way of plugging in the battery on the DJI goggles is with this long cable. You put the battery in your pocket, you plug it into the goggles. This cable falls out so easily. So when I first started doing it, I zip tied the cable to the actual strap holder and then plugged it in from there. I've since adopted this analog mod where you can see that I've zip tied this power cable to here and I plug it in up top, and then this is my strain relief for the port down there, and then this one never falls out because it's not under strain. So that's just kind of a quick tip, is this for whatever, like that plug just like it falls out if you sneeze. Like, it's not good in the year of COVID. Well, the DJI system does support analog mods and running an aux input to use these as viewing for any other kind of analog receiver, whether that's a built-in one or an actual like ground station. It's kind of an underwhelming experience. You lose video here and there. It doesn't really record DVR. Like, there's some things that you can do that you can't do, and it's just not a good experience. I'd rather have two separate goggles, one for digital, one for analog. Obviously, I'm going to choose my Fat Sharks. The analog system is good enough if you are, just getting started, but as you want to get into racing more and more, again, the only place that I really recommend using analog for anymore. But if you want to get into racing, which is really the only place I recommend using analog anymore, you'll probably want to eventually upgrade to something like Fat Sharks or Orcas. These goggles are pretty big and bulky and heavy, especially when you compare them to something like the Fat Sharks. Like, they stick off your head way further, they're bigger, and they are harder to fit in your bag. These, I think, compact a little bit better, especially with an antenna like that, the Pyro Patch. That's a minor complaint, but I do wish these were like maybe a third smaller. It would be pretty nice. If you're not subscribed, please do. There's a whole bunch of you that are watching this video that are not. Like, it's like 25% are actually subscribed. I'd love it if you could do it. We're almost to 100,000. Like, it would be so cool to get there. Subscribe now! The biggest downside, and probably the one that I should have launched with, is that they don't integrate very well with people that are flying analog. Because these both transmit and receive and generally work on a higher output power than the analog video transmitters that you're normally using, they can stomp on people that are flying analog pretty easily. So that's a big downside. I hope eventually that there's a way that we'll be allowed to use these in a lower band or in a further separated band or something where we can fly analog and digital quads at the same time more easily. It can be done. It's just not the ideal experience, and as a result, they're not really welcomed at races as much or things like that. So that's something that I eventually hope that we could figure out for the future of FPV with both analog and digital. The next big downside that people always want to talk about is the cost. And yes, I will admit point blank, it is a little bit more expensive than your analog counterparts. However, I want you to think about this for just a quick second. You got a camera. If you're running like a Racer 2, that's going to be in the $35 to $40 range. If you're using a Unify HV Pro, that's a $50 VTX. If you're using TBS Crossfire, I guess it's now down to like 22 or 23 bucks, but it was 30 bucks for a long time. That's 40, 60, that's $110, $120 just in cameras, receivers, and video transmitters. Where yes, this is $180 bucks. Oh, antennas, I forgot about antennas, which are another 20 bucks on top of everything. So like, when you look at that, it's only a difference of, like maybe $5 to $10 per component. Like if you're just like adding a little bit more premium. Now you could get a much cheaper analog setup than you can for DJI, but it's not that much of a price difference, just over the year that I've been flying DJI, I have encountered very few people that the faceplate actually fits their face shape. For whatever reason, on my head, it fits me almost perfectly. I have a little bit of light leak down here, but I actually don't mind that because when I'm flying, I can actually take a quick peek down at my radio and I can actually see what's going on. I've kind of integrated it into my process for flying. I don't know if that's good or bad. I've encountered like one other person that's like, yeah, it fits me perfectly, which, over a year's use, that's not a good sign. And my final big pain point on the DJI system is that these MMCX antenna things don't stay in very well. Like at the beginning, like they just pop out. Like, and there's no satisfying, like, is it in? Is it out? Is it out? Like, it's not ideal. So I wish that these were like SMA or something stronger, or like some version of MMCX that didn't suck. I think if you use not 90-degree angle adapters, like the ones that are like straight in, I don't know what that would be, but like 0-degree angle, I guess. Those stay in a little bit better because because what happens is that you want to mount these so that they're pointing up like that, out of the quad mostly, but there's this lip on the air unit that as you turn it, it kind of pushes on it a little bit, gives it a little bit of strain, and then it pops out as a result. So yeah, minor complaint, but can get pretty annoying if you end up having to plug it in over and over and over again. But something that could be adjusted for version 2. A final downside of the DJI FPV system is that it's really hard to give a director or a producer a monitor so that they can see what you're seeing. Either you have to put the goggles on them, which a lot of people don't like to do, or you have to give them the smart controller. Now, it's really cool that they opened up the ability for you to be able to plug in a USB-C to the goggles into the smart controller and be able to see in this what the goggles see, but it's really kind of a chintzy, like just hack of a solution. Like I wish that these could just connect straight to the drone and you see exactly what it is and you're done. But no, you've got to like have a USB-C cable and it's got to be plugged straight into the goggle. It's not a good solution. It could be so much better. I am glad that it exists, but I want to take it to the next level. I wish I could fly the drone with this controller. Like this is so much nicer than this one. I think with a little bit of adjustment, like you could actually operate a drone pretty well. I wouldn't fly it off the screen, but it would be cool to use this in addition to this. I don't know, just pipe dreams here. But over the past year of using this system, I think my favorite thing is to see all the different products and features that have come out to support this. You've got flight controllers with default plugs that power it, that automatically come pre-flashed so that the receiver and the VTX and the OSD and all that stuff works. You've got different people come out with different faceplate foams and analog mods and you know, all sorts of different things to support this being integrated into the hobby because we do love it. Some people don't. I happen to really, really like it, and I'm excited to see what the next year and beyond of using the DJI digital FPV system brings. So thanks very much for chatting with me about what my experience has been like over the last year. I hope this was informative to you and informs how you're going to pursue these things in the future. Stay flying.